Welcome back to the Let's Run Fit podcast. I'm your host, B. Lit. Last week, we had the pleasure of speaking with the incredible Esther Avant, and the conversation was so engaging that we couldn't fit it all into one episode. That's why here today, we're going to be doing part 2 of our episode, where we are continuing our discussion on nutrition and motivation. If you have not listened to episode 18 yet, please pause this episode now and go back and listen to episode 18 first. That way you are not going to feel confused as we dive right into part 2 here on episode 19. So let's get started with those big rocks of nutrition. And breakfast especially seems to be the hardest thing to get anyone of any age to really buy into, because somehow we got it in our brains. Breakfast was the easiest meal to skip because if you don't eat it, you don't really feel hungry right away and you can kind of get by. And I'm like, but don't you feel sluggish? Don't you feel tired? And they're like, yeah, I'm exhausted. I'm chugging coffee. I was like, do you think it's because you didn't eat anything?
Yeah. These are such good examples of just how complex making actual lifestyle changes is and how ingrained a lot of our current behaviors are in just society overall. Things like drinking a bottle of wine at night to make it through parenting and make it through your job. Chugging yourself through, full of coffee all day because you're not fueling yourself nutritiously, things like that. When most other people are doing those things, it just becomes the norm. It's like, oh, this is what everybody does. This is just what it's like. And it's hard to be in the minority. And props to the first athlete on your team who bought in. And,
I have no clue why she did. She did it right away. She had no questions, no doubts. She's like, let's go. She's the one that dropped a minute and a half because she had the full season of it.
Good for her.
Just and trusted me. And I was like,
yeah, I'd be interested in like her family background. Did she have some sort of like nutrition awareness that other kids don't or things like that? But
I am trying to get her on this podcast to talk about her season.
Yeah, that would be bad. That would be awesome.
I've been trying so hard.
But you're right. Like, this is why it's so hard, because all of the stuff is so ingrained and just feels so normal that when someone like a coach comes to you and says like, well, I think, there's like these degrees of separation that like, well, the reason that your running times haven't improved is blah, 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 blah. You should be eating breakfast. And they're like, hang on a second.
Yeah.
What does running have to do with breakfast? Like it seems like there's so many steps in between that it's hard to make the connections. And it's hopefully, that the second kid saw the first kid and was like, oh, you know what? It seems to be working. And again, that goes back to kind of the ripple effect of think about the impact that just one person can have. And when you start to make these changes for yourself and then you go to work or you inspire your family and you have all of these other people who are like, okay, yeah, you know what? I'll try it. And then they do. And then they get to change their lives too. Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. Keeping on track with nutrition. I know for anyone who comes to me and they're very new to their process, they seem so confused, especially when it comes to how much food you're actually supposed to be eating. Like I actually had one person who came to me and they're like, I can't figure out why I can't lose weight. I keep cutting back my food. And they're like, I'm not losing, I'm gaining, but I'm eating like barely anything. And I'm like, I kind of look at them, I kind of make an estimate because, we can estimate about, and I'll be like, you probably need to be eating about 2,400 calories a day. And her jaw just dropped. She's like, I'm eating like 1,100. I was like, that's why you're not losing weight. And they just can't comprehend why like your body can't survive if you're starving it to death and when it's terrified. How do you kind of have those conversations? Because that's actually something I've been really struggling with as a coach myself, is trying to convince someone you actually need to eat more. Like no adult should ever be eating like 1,000 calories a day. Like it's very, very few adults should ever have that amount kind of thing. Like, how do you kind of have those conversations about getting them to the right amount of food and the right kinds of food? Because so often that's the most difficult thing I find. They're baffled.
Yeah. I think, the right kinds of food is really where the issue lies, because at the end of the day, no one is eating too little and not losing weight or gaining weight. That's not how thermodynamics works. We've all seen prisoners of war. We've all seen people who have anorexia who literally starve to death and are skin and bones because they have been actually starving. So when you see someone who is overweight, who's telling you, I'm eating very little, but I'm not losing weight, something else is going on here. Mm-hmm. You are not a medical anomaly who does not, does not fall into the constraints of physics. So there's usually one of a couple of things happening. Number one, it's very easy to be eating more than you realize. We talked a little bit earlier about, breaking the cycles of mindless eating and things like that. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say I could sit down with a bag of chips or, whatever, probably take in an easy 600, 800, maybe 1,000 calories, still be hungry for my next meal.
Because there's no fiber.
Right. There's so many opportunities throughout the day to take in essentially empty calories that don't make us satiated. And they don't even like register on our radar. The coffee you get at Starbucks might be 300 calories.
Oh yeah, those are so high in calorie.
Right. The handful of trail mix that you grab a couple times a day in between classes could be 200-300 calories. And you're telling yourself, no, I barely ate anything today. I had my, a piece of fruit and I had a protein shake and then I had some chicken on a salad and yeah, that's pretty much it. Very often there's an entire day's worth of calories that has gone unnoticed because you just don't have the awareness of it. There's really interesting research about even registered dietitians who have very good awareness of nutrition. When we, what we think we're taking in and what we're actually taking in is sometimes drastically different. People will say, swear up and down, I'm eating 1,200 calories, and they really think they are. And then under, more controlled settings, it turns out to be 2,400. So the first piece of it is let's really get clear on how much you're actually eating. Let's figure out. One really common pattern is under eating during the day, much like your kids. It's 4 p.m. I've only had a bag of chips.
That's awful.
And then I go home and all hell breaks loose. I have a bag of chips while I'm cooking dinner. I wash it down with wine. I have my full meal. I want something sweet afterwards. And that, 200 calories I had until 4 p.m. now is 2,200 because I just ate those other 2,000 from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Another common pattern is maybe you're very restrictive. Like you said, maybe you are doing 1,000 calories Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday morning. But then you're so restricted, you're so hungry that the weekends you feel like, oh, I deserve a break. I've been so good all week. I can ease up a little bit. And then you more than offset that low intake with essentially binging from Friday to Sunday. And yes, you're under eating part of the week and you're overlooking the extent to which you're overeating the rest of the week and the fact that it's balancing out or that it's putting you in a slight surplus. So that's the first piece that I would look at. And it's very rarely intentional, like deceit. It's more often, lack of awareness. The second thing I look at is the sort of volume of foods that people are eating. A lot of times when people say, I don't eat very much, what they're meaning is I don't eat very much volume. Like I never have a full plate of food. I never feel full. And again, that goes back to lack of fiber, lack of protein, where if most of your foods are processed, packaged, hyperpalatable, that go down really easily, you can have 500-600 calories, not feel full, not really register how many calories that was. And then when you do start eating a more nutritious diet, it feels like so much more food. And that's where people get into like, oh, I'm eating so much more now. And now I'm losing weight. And it's like, you're eating more volume, you're eating more protein, you're eating more fiber, but calorically you're eating less. And it's just that, if you looked at, you probably see the infographics like on social media, 350 calories from Doritos, 350 calories from chicken, rice, potatoes, you have a full plate. So a lot of times it's more of a volume and a macronutrient issue that the quality of the calories you're taking in makes a big difference in terms of your satiety. And then if you're actually feeling full from a well-balanced, nutritious meal, you're going to snack a lot less in between. And there go all of those empty calories.
Do you try to line up like anyone's nutrition with specific whatever their exercise is? Or do you just kind of say, let's try to eat healthy and the rest will fall into place? Like, are you ever someone who, as a coach, says, so this is what your goal is, so we're going to focus more on these macros and this amount? Or is it just really like, let's try to eat healthy? And I know you mentioned earlier, like protein and fiber as being a rock. So is it really just like, let's just focus on getting those in and just hope the rest kind of falls into place? Not like, not hope, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like normally
Yeah,
if you start focusing on one, the rest kind of fall in.
that is what we find, that the exact amounts of carbs and fats that people need is really secondary, at least as far as fat loss goes, is really secondary to your total calories and protein. So we don't want to major in the minors. And part of why a lot of people find tracking their food time consuming or laborious is because they're trying to play Tetris. They're trying to hit all of these numbers all at once, and it feels like a lot. So if certain things are more impactful than others, focus on the ones giving you more bang for your buck. And yeah, typically the other stuff kind of falls into place afterwards. I would say, given that, you know, you're working with athletes, and if somebody has specific performance related goals, that's when you would get more into the finer details or the smaller rocks. But for just general population, like I want to lose some weight, I want to be healthier in general, I want to feel better, that stuff just doesn't really matter that much. So I would rather we just focus on the big rocks to start. Most people find that once they've kind of mastered those, they don't have really any interest in getting any more dialed in. They're happy with their results and they just want to keep it simple. Some people, especially those that are a little bit more kind of science minded and like to experiment, might then benefit from seeing, how does my body feel on a higher carb diet or a higher fat diet? How do I feel if I eat this instead of that? Or how does my performance change if I do, you know, oatmeal instead of banana, that sort of thing. But that's more, you know, specialized for people who want to, rather than stuff that anybody really needs to do.
For your exercise program, do you find any type of exercise that seems to fit in better, especially for like busy moms and just busy people in general? Because like not everyone has time to just get out the door and run, or they can't get out the door because there's little teeny tiny humans at home that needs them inside. Like, have you found like a type of exercise that's really good for someone beginning on a time crunch?
We do primarily dumbbell training, and usually in a circuit fashion, or at least like doing supersets where you're doing a couple of exercises back to back to minimize the rest that you need. If somebody had no equipment, I'd start with just body weight. Bands can work too. I'm not a huge fan of bands. It's nothing like really legit against them. They're just not my favorite. But usually what we recommend is getting a couple pairs of moderately heavy dumbbells to start. And you can really do so much with them. And then over time, you know, every say 3-6 months, you're upgrading to a heavier set, or maybe you invest in like an adjustable set. They don't take up a ton of space. They're very versatile. So that's usually what we start with, is just roughly 30-minute circuit training sessions, full body. So, you know, if you're going from a squat to a chest press to a row, you're working different muscle groups. You're not needing to rest a ton in between. And again, this is general population. If you're wanting to get as strong as possible, you're going to want to be lifting with, you know, I'd probably a barbell. You're going to be wanting taking several minutes rest in between, doing lower reps, things like that. But just for, you know, for like our busy working moms, I think dumbbells are about as good as it gets.
They are. I have a weight tree, and it was probably the best thing I ever bought, because I'll just like go in and like just do like a couple sets of something, and then I just go about my day. Like I don't even do weight training as a specified section anymore, because like my brain just can't stand the like rest period in between. It just drives me crazy at this point, because I'm now a runner to the point that I'm used to just going and then I'm done. And then having to rest like I did when I was a power lifter, just like it drives me up the wall. So I'll just like go do it, and then I'll go back and like go wash a couple dishes, come back, do another set, and then go and wash the dishes.
I actually love that. I do that too. Because it does seem like, even though obviously it does have a purpose, especially when you're busy and when you're not, you know, trying to compete or trying to, you know, set a record or something, it just feels inefficient. That
you're just like staring at the wall 3 minutes, like, okay.
right. You're like, I don't have an hour and a half to give this thing, and to have like 20 of those minutes be actually active time.
Yeah.
So yeah, either
when I was
being
powerlifting, I sat on the bench at the gym for a good 20 minutes of the entire workout. Minimum 20 minutes. You're just sitting there. So if you ever go to a gym and you see someone sitting, there's a good chance that they're doing it with purpose. Because I think a lot of beginners are like, why do they just sit there? They're in my way. I'm like, they're actually doing something.
Yeah, I know. It can be so frustrating though. I rarely go to a commercial gym anymore, but when I do, I always find myself annoyed that like, yeah, sure, I'm sure everybody else is like doing things that they need to, but also like people are in my way and using the things that I want to use. So I've become, since having a kid, I've become a big advocate for training at home, because you don't need to get dressed. You don't need to have anybody in your way. You can do it whenever you're able. You can do, like you said, you can, you know, be interspersing a little bit of lifting, a little bit of housework, and it gets done.
Yeah, I'm the weirdo that jumps around. A lot of my listeners, they are beginners and they're getting started, and a lot of them don't have the biggest budget. So, what would you say are like the main body weights? I know you mentioned a couple body weight moves. So, what's something that they could do to kind of get themselves started until they were able to save up the money or earn the money or whatever to get the dumbbells? I know dumbbells, I promise you're 100% correct. They're amazing. They are absolutely fantastic. But what's something that they can do just to kind of get them started?
Yeah. So our bodies are a great source of resistance. And there's actually, great books out there. The one that I read years ago is called Convict Conditioning. And it was this guy who was a felon, and he was in prison and didn't have access to, weights, except I don't know. I don't even remember if he had access to the gym at all, but, he was doing one arm pull-ups and one arm push-ups and single leg squats, and just making the most of what he had, which was his body. So there's so much you can do with your body. I would start with the basics: your lunges, your squats, your glute bridge or your hip thrust for lower body. If you have something safe that you can step up on, step ups are great. For upper body, push-ups are a staple in basically everything that I do. It's hard to work your back if you don't have anything external. I would probably go Superman's, where you're lying on your stomach with your arms and legs out straight, and you kind of get yourself into like a banana shape.
And they're harder than they look.
They are much harder than they look. I would say for upper body, especially, like, just start looking. I'm looking around my house right now. Start looking around your house for objects that you can use that are heavy. You can fill a couple of 20-ounce water bottles with sand. You can take the jug of laundry detergent that you buy at Costco that, somehow weighs like 20 pounds. Yeah. And you can use that for single arm rows and things like that. So be a little resourceful. When we first locked down for COVID, our exercise physiologist did a session on exactly this, like creating weights out of household objects. An easy one is taking a backpack and filling it with books, things like that. So that's an easy way. You don't have to spend any money. You already have heavy stuff. It's just seeing it in a new light. So as you feel like, okay, you know what, I could do 25 squats, just my body, and it doesn't feel that hard. Now I'm going to hug a backpack, or I'm going to wear a backpack. Or even if you're just doing body weight, just slowing down the motion. So if you feel like you can, pump them out, then start lowering for a 3 count, pausing at the bottom for a couple seconds, standing back up for a 3 count. Same thing with your push-ups. Anytime you're spending more time under tension, it's going to feel a lot more difficult. So there's so many ways that you can start with just your body and be appropriately challenged. And then from there, figuring out, okay, how can I make this a little bit harder? Do I need a kid to come, sit on my back? Do I want to put my feet on an elevated surface so that I'm doing decline push-ups? All that stuff. So not having equipment is certainly not a reason to not get started.
And I love that you mentioned the time under tension, because that's also a way to save money with the dumbbells too.
Mm-hmm. You
can just change the length of time that you're using a dumbbell, and suddenly you could keep using those dumbbells a little bit longer before you have to invest more money to get more. Because I'm all about finding ways to, ball on a budget. So like that would be a good one right there.
And I would say too, I have a really nice garage gym now that I outfitted, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, mostly through Facebook Marketplace. I got great deals there. There's a ton of equipment for sale always, but especially now post-COVID, where people bought all sorts of stuff that, now they went back to their gym or they're just not using it. You can find really good deals. And looking at places like Goodwill, Play It Again Sports for deals, even Goodwill, Target, Goodwill or Salvation Army. If you keep an eye out for long enough, you will likely find weights at much cheaper than you can get them for normal retail. And it's kind of fun too. It's like a treasure hunt. I remember we were living in Hawaii, and I saw a Facebook post about some bumper plates, and I messaged the guy right away. I was like on my way to get them. And it was literally like a whoever gets here first situation. He was like, I've been, screwed enough times before. I'm not reserving them for anybody. Whoever is here first can have them. And I like pulled in seconds before this guy behind me. And it was like several like big, Hawaiian men. And I was like, I hope this doesn't turn into like a dangerous situation for me, that they're like, listen, little girl, these are mine. And I'd be like, okay, sorry. But it's fun to like see what deals are out there and to see what you can put together on a budget.
Yeah, I liked also the example with the book bag. Like, I would have never thought of that. Like, as a health and fitness coach, I would have never put together just fill up a book bag with books. Like, that's so simple.
I know, right?
It's so wonderful. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, how have I not thought of that? I was like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah, and you can do it on the back. You can bear hug it. They're super versatile.
Like I always joke because I work at a school that has 3 floors. And the elevator is not practical because, for one, it was built in the 80s. So it makes lots of strange noises. But I always joke about how much more out of breath I am in the morning when I'm having to come up with my lunch and my full half-gallon of water and my book bag compared to the afternoons, if I'm having to go up and down during the day, without any of those things, or even just kind of how light my book bag is after work. Because, I've drank my half-gallon of water. And,
I drank the water, ate the food. Yep.
So it's just lighter. And I'm just like, this is crazy. And that's 100%. I'm getting all that extra resistance in the morning just because my book bag's full.
Yeah.
And like, it's awful. It's heavy. When people are doing their workouts, they often end up hitting a plateau. Unfortunately, plateaus are part of a fitness journey for one reason or another. What's something you use, kind of going back to the motivation side, to help, your clients overcome these challenges and break through that plateau? Because plateaus come everywhere. They're annoying, but they're here.
Yeah, that's such a good point to make. Like, they're just part of the process. A lot of times we blow them out of proportion and make them mean something they don't. Nothing has gone wrong if things have stabilized. It's just what happens.
It means your body caught up.
Right. So I think, first of all, helping kind of redefine plateau. I've talked to a lot of women who will say, for 2 days in a row, my weight was the same. I'm in a plateau. Like, what do I do? Should I drop my calories? And we're talking like a true plateau. We're talking like a month plus of very high compliance and no progress, not just on the scale. Your measurements aren't changing. Your photos aren't changing. Nothing is changing. And I think that's a good reminder that, like, we don't want to go changing things because you've been, quote unquote, stuck for a couple of days. So we need to reframe, like, what even is a plateau? I think it also helps, assuming that you are in an actual one and it's been weeks since anything has changed, rather than focusing on how nothing is changing. Reminding yourself, what I have done in this time is maintain this new, reality for myself, this new low weight. So if previously you would lose weight and then immediately start to gain it back, and now you've gone a month of not doing that, that is progress. And I think the kind of the stepwise experience of, losing some, leveling off and maintaining, losing some, leveling off and maintaining is actually a good thing, because each step of the way you're proving to yourself, I can do this. This is my new norm. And then from there, it's just about being kind of logical rather than emotional. Like we were talking about, nothing has gone seriously wrong. Odds are, now that as you have lost weight, your body is smaller, your body needs fewer calories. What used to be a deficit is now maintenance for you. You need to reduce calories a little bit. We're talking like maybe 100 calories, not significantly. Or before I make any changes like that, we really look at effort. It's very easy to just get complacent, to start kind of going through the motions. Like, maybe you're still doing your workouts, but you're not really pushing yourself to lift heavier. Maybe you're still tracking your food, but you've gotten lax about, like, I don't need to track that handful of trail mix. It wasn't that big a deal. Or I only had a bite of this. Like, that doesn't really count. And next thing you know, you have, like, most of your food is documented, but some of it isn't. So the first thing we look at is, have your behaviors changed? And could that be what's causing this? And something I usually challenge clients with is, like, if your house was on the line and you had to show up to the best of your ability in nutrition and exercise, would you be doing anything differently? And usually people are like, well, there's a little bit more that I could be doing. So sometimes just getting back to the basics and getting back to the big rocks with the same enthusiasm that you did initially is all it takes to get things moving. I've had clients who've lost 40 plus pounds and not made any reductions to their calories, because anytime things started to slow, they did sort of the self-reflecting on, oh, you know what? I've gotten lax. I'm not moving as much, or I'm not being as precise with my measuring and things like that. So you don't want to be too quick to exercise more and eat less, but there will likely, especially if you have a significant amount to lose, there will likely be a time when what you've been doing stops working, again, because of physics. And it's just a matter of, let's let's make a slight change and get things moving again.
So it's very similar, like when running, you kind of have to keep changing your running routine to keep your body from getting used to it, because our bodies are always trying to catch up. The reason we need heavier weights is because our bodies are like, oh crap, we're having to lift this weight. Let's build myself stronger so I don't have to worry about that next time. Next time I'm not going to get, eaten by the lion because I couldn't pick up the rock, or, whatever caveman process is in there. So if you never, lift heavier rocks, your body's gonna be like, okay, we're good. We're at homeostasis. We're settled. We're fine. We're not going to die. We'll be okay. So then you have to lift a heavier rock to make your body go, oh crap, now we got to build more and keep
Exactly.
growing.
Bodies are very efficient. Like you said, they want to maintain homeostasis. They want to get to a point where they're not needing to exert a lot of energy to get things done. So as you get more efficient at the things you've been doing, you need to figure out, how do I change now to continue putting myself in a position where I can improve?
Right. It's amazing what our bodies can do. And I always laugh and say, for as smart as our bodies are, they're also kind of dumb in the terms of, we're not living in caves anymore. Chill.
Right? Yeah. Yes. We do have a lot of those, kind of caveman tendencies. That's like, well, it's no longer practical. So if we could catch up,
it's not been an issue for a couple thousand years.
Right.
I appreciate your help, but it always just makes me laugh. I always laugh about that too. Going with motivation. Motivation. It took me 3 tries. Motivation can definitely get more elusive. Like you mentioned, you get a little bit more lax as, you get through, you're like, oh, I'm making progress. And like you even mentioned, you sometimes don't even realize that you've kind of gotten a little bit less motivated and less, on point. What is like your go-to way to kind of get that motivation? Is it just pointing out like, hey, this is what it actually is? You just kind of not slacked off on purpose, but you slacked off by accident. Like, how do you kind of really help someone realize it's happening so they can stay consistent over time?
Yeah. So you need some sort of system of self-assessment. We do this in our weekly check-ins with clients. They reflect on their previous week, what went well, what didn't, did they hit their goals? But you can do it on your own when you're doing your life admin that we talked about earlier. You need to be checking in with yourself. A, you need to be setting goals in the first place. And then B, you need to be asking yourself, have I been doing the things? We use very basic, essentially like sticker charts where you just track your consistency, because that way it's very easy to see at a glance, oh, well, I've only shown up for half my strength workouts this month. I guess that could be why I'm not seeing any changes. The progress we're seeing and how motivated we feel go hand in hand. The action and the results are really what breed the motivation. So I think just like with plateaus, understanding that you're not going to be motivated all the time, and it's not a problem. Nobody is. Even, hearing a couple of coaches talking, we're not motivated all the time either. The thing that separates the successful people who make it look easy from everybody else is they've figured out the ways to show up consistently, regardless of whether or not they're motivated. And a lot of that comes down to routines and habits of, if I have just trained myself that I wake up and I work out, it doesn't matter how I'm feeling in the morning. I wake up, I work out, because that's when I do it. I think another piece is recognizing that, well, first going back to what's driving you. It's easy to have like a sense of urgency when you get started because you've had some sort of like awakening or some rock bottom moment where you're like, something needs to change. And then once you do, and once you started to see some initial progress where, now maybe your clothes are fitting better, or you're less achy, or your times have improved and now you're not, coming in last, it's easy to kind of take your foot off the gas and be like, oh, okay, well, that stuff that was really driving me before, that's not as much of an issue now. And you need to reconnect to what's driving you now. Are you going to settle for just being a middle of the pack runner? Or is your goal to be winning or to be setting records? Is your goal to lose 10 pounds and stop there? Or do you actually want to keep going and lose the 40 that you said? So having those opportunities to reconnect to what's driving you and acknowledge, like, maybe what's driving me now is different than what it was before, and getting in tune with, okay, so what is it now? What's really driving me? Why is it worth it to show up even when I don't want to? Because this thing is important enough to me. And then I think once you have that, the next piece is connecting the day-to-day actions to that larger goal. And that can be hard to do because your goal is like this kind of long-term thing. And the day-to-day stuff is in your face right now. It's very easy to feel like, well, hitting my steps today, it doesn't really matter. Hitting, my calories today or getting my workout in today, it doesn't really matter. And individually, it doesn't. It's what you do most of the time that matters. But the problem is it's very easy for that to snowball into, well, I missed yesterday. So like you said before, also, I quote unquote messed up on Monday night. I'll start again next Monday. So sure, each individual one isn't hugely consequential, but together they are. So instead of feeling like, oh, I have to work out, I have to eat these things, I have to be reminding yourself, I want to do these things because I want the result that doing them consistently is going to give me. And I'm going to have to, what feels like sacrifice right now to get that thing later. And that's why the emotional driver is so important, because if you don't have that connection, if it's just this like surface level, oh, I just want to see a smaller number, then when you're faced with short-term temptations, you're going to be a lot more prone to fall victim to them. Whereas if that why is so strong, you're like, oh yeah, I do want to be feeling amazing at my daughter's wedding. And every choice I make between now and then is going to help me feel that way. This meal does matter. This workout does matter. And when you start to see that they actually do add up, it's that much easier to show up regardless of motivation.
What about someone who's just really at the start and really just low confidence? Like they barely even believe that they're going to be able to lose the weight or run the time goal or whatever it is. What's something you do to help them go? Because that's something I see a lot is they're like, well, why am I even going to try? I can't do it. Or I'll be able to do it like a week. Like, how do you kind of get them through those confidence and get that confidence boost? Because like you said, once they see the motivation not once they see the motivation, once they see the results, then they get motivated. So how do you kind of get someone kickstarted who just really doesn't have the confidence to know that they can do anything? They just actually have to start.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one that plagues most people is throughout the course of trying and, seeming like we've failed in the past, we come to believe that it's not possible for us. And if something's not possible, or if we run the risk of trying again and failing, and that feels terrible, then the safest thing to do is to not try. So the real key to overcoming that is to give yourself opportunities to rebuild your self-trust and your confidence. And that requires starting really small, figuring out what is a small win that I can give myself today. It doesn't even need to be related to the big goal that you're working toward. You just need to start showing up for yourself. So maybe you have a habit of having good intentions the night before, you set the alarm, you're going to do a workout. And then when push comes to shove, you hit snooze until you're late and you're running out the door with a muffin in your mouth. So maybe your first step is tomorrow I am putting my phone out of reach. So I have to get out of bed to turn it off and I am not hitting snooze. And just that one win gives you a little bit more confidence. I've done it once. I've proven to myself it is possible, even for me. Maybe you're in the habit of bringing a lunch to work and then getting coerced to go out with your coworkers and, eat whatever they do instead. So it's just one time eating the lunch that you planned. Maybe it's something as small as, like you did with your client, I'm going to do a wall sit while I brush my teeth. Anything that gives you the opportunity to set a goal, follow through on it, and celebrate that win helps you rebuild confidence. And just like the small day-to-day actions get you to your longer-term goal, those small choices build your confidence to the point that you do start to believe it is possible for me to achieve this big thing that I want. All I have to do is continue showing up for myself.
I love it. It's the small things that add up. I always kind of say the process and progress goals of how you really can get to your main thing. And with goals, a lot of people I've noticed also set very unachievable goals. Like they're not realistic. Like it'll be someone who weighs 200 pounds who's like, I want to lose 75. I was like, yeah, but you're 6'3". Like, what do you mean you want to lose 75 pounds and weigh 125 pounds? You're 6'3". That's just, it's not realistic for you. What's something you do with your clients to really help them set realistic and attainable goals?
That's such a good question. And I think that really is kind of a killer of a lot of people's momentum and progress is when you set unrealistic goals, you're setting yourself up for failure, because when you inevitably fall short of them, you feel bad about it and then you give up. So it's really important to be realistic right from the jump. And I think that starts with educating on what is healthy and sustainable and realistic. We're looking at, 0.5% to 1% of your body weight per week, which for most people is like 0.5 pound to 2 pounds. And it's not going to be linear. You need to set that expectation right from the jump. There are going to be weeks that you lose a whole bunch. There are going to be weeks that you don't lose at all or you gain. And it's just part of the process. The fluctuations are normal. They're part of it. What I usually do is have clients, figure out how much weight do they want to lose total. How long would it take if they're losing 2 pounds a week? How long would it take if they're losing 0.5 pound a week? And having that sort of be the range, and like, let's wrap your head around, if you want to lose 50 pounds, we're looking at, 6 months to 2 years. How do we reconcile that with what you would like? We would all like to just snap our fingers and be there now. So how do we help you accept that this is going to be a lengthier process than you would like it to be? And then I also encourage setting, adding some extra time to that range just for life happening. That we talked earlier about making plans, and then life
loves to come ruin them.
Right, exactly. So I think it's important to recognize that things sound good on paper, and there are going to be things that thwart them. So instead of, hanging on to that range like it's your lifeline, acknowledging that you're going to go on vacation, you're going to get sick, you're going to get busy at work, your kids are going to get sick, you're going to travel. There's going to be a lot of times where you feel like this week was kind of a wash. Maybe I didn't move backwards, but I certainly didn't move forward. And if you anticipate that that's going to be part of it right from the jump, it's a lot easier to stomach and to be like, oh, okay, I kind of built this in to the plan, which means that nothing has gone wrong. I just need to get myself back to it as soon as I'm able. And then I think the other piece is learning to celebrate every step along the way, not just on the scale, not every pound, although that's worth celebrating too, but all of the non-scale victories that you're going to experience along the way, rather than feeling like, oh, there's nothing to celebrate unless I'm, 15 pounds down, or I don't want to, buy new clothes yet because I'm not where I want to be yet. We kind of delay the celebration of our progress, and that makes the process so much less enjoyable. So instead, if you go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to notice and document every positive that these changes have. I'm going to notice that since I've been drinking more water, my skin is more clear. I'm going to notice that I'm sleeping way better. I'm going to notice that I was better able to zip up my jeans and they weren't as tight, fresh out of the laundry as they normally are, even though the scales only moved a few pounds. When you start to keep that laundry list of all of the other benefits, it just helps keep the scale in perspective and helps you see that it's not about getting there. It's about the process that it takes to get there. And that when you can focus on the good and you can make it as enjoyable as possible, you're no longer just like kind of white knuckling your way to the end. And more so you're recognizing like, I can live my life along the way. And if it takes longer than I'd like, so be it, because this life is pretty good.
I love that. It's all about the mindset going into it, which is another question I have, which is for those who come in, they make realistic goals, they stick to their plan, they're doing everything that they're told to do, they're eating the right amounts and the right timing, they're doing their workouts, but they just have a really negative mindset the entire time. We've all had those people where they do everything right, but they still somehow complain the entire time. Those are the best people in the world, right? Lots of sarcasm there. What is something you kind of use as a coach to try to get that mindset away so they can enjoy the journey when, even though you're like, look, like your jeans are fitting better, your skin's clear, you're sleeping better. Yeah, but it's only been 2 pounds. Like, how do you kind of help them find the positive when they're refusing to look at it, even though it's like just staring them in the face?
It's so tough and it can be so frustrating. And there definitely are those people that you're just like, no matter, like you could have won the lottery on the most beautiful day of the year in a dream location, and somehow you found something to complain about. Like there do seem to be a percentage of the population who just have sort of that the glass is always shattered type mentality. I think the best you can do as a coach is continue to show up for them with the energy that you want them to reflect back. and to recognize that it's not on you to change them, but that you do have the opportunity to show them how things can be different. And instead of letting that negativity drag you down, where you're then matching their energy and you're just like, okay, yeah, like, well, what do you want to do? Or, maybe this isn't working. Sure, we should try something else. Continuing to show up with, giving them the benefit of all the doubt and continuing to be that positive influence in their lives. What I've seen time and time again is that it just takes repetition. We don't, as much as we get to know our clients and we can get to know them pretty intimately, we're never going to know like the full extent of what somebody's been through or how they've ended up with such a negative mindset. And oftentimes it's related to not having anyone in their lives who's ever really fully believed in them and not fully believing in themselves. So what I always try to remember is like, I want to be the person in their lives who is the rock, who believes in them no matter what, who shows up for them and helps them see that they're deserving of it and almost like just wears them down over time. And, it's like every week, and I have clients I've worked with for years and, and who struggle with negativity. And eventually I do start to see the glimpses of that shift happening, where first it might be all negativity all the time. And you as the coach are the one saying, okay, but here's all the positives that I'm noticing. And it's just kind of like going right over. And then it might be a little bit more neutral. It might be like, yeah, here's all the negative stuff that happened, but like, maybe that's not so bad, or like a little bit less negative. And then it's really about a matter of just kind of like evening out the soundtrack. And not trying to be this like over the top positive Polly of like putting a, painting the poop gold or whatever the saying is, but instead like just offering a relatively equal amount of the good of like, okay, I'm not trying to deny that like that things are hard or that you're frustrated. You're allowed to feel that way. And also let's just make sure that we shine the spotlight on the positive that is happening. And I think little by little that does start to have an impact on someone, where by you showing them over and over again, just out of sheer repetition, they're likely to start noticing it themselves.
All right. My last question for you. All right. It's going to be for those who get overwhelmed. So it's someone who's been doing well and just maybe life got them down, and it's not even the fitness and health that's got them actually overwhelmed, but just kind of life just piled and they're just having a breakdown on you. I'm sure you've had that happen. I know I have, where they just come to me and they're just in tears and they're like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like they'll find like the plateau maybe to look at, or they'll just be like, the timing is just not working, or this isn't working. I just feel like I can't do this. Kind of what's something you kind of advice you give them to help them get through the moments when they really just feel like they can't go on?
Yeah. I think that goes back to sort of being the rock as well. It's very helpful to have somebody who is not otherwise related to your day-to-day life, who you can just vent to, and they don't have opinions of the people in your lives. They're not judging. Like it's purely just an outlet. So I think, a lot of coaching is like pretty therapeutic. It's just having somebody that you can say these things to, that you can have the emotional meltdown. I've had dozens of coaching calls that we didn't talk about exercise and nutrition at all. We talked about life. We talked about how annoying your husband is being. We talked about grieving, the loss of a parent. We've talked about frustrations with kids. A lot of it is just, being there for somebody to be like, life is hard right now, and I don't need a solution. I don't need anything except to just get this out. I know, for me personally, when I'm venting, that's what I want. And I think it's a very healthy thing to have an emotional outlet where you can cry, you can swear, you can throw things, you can get those things out, because bottling them up is not going to help. You will then just explode worse down the line. So if you have something you need to get off your chest and you feel comfortable allowing me to be the person that receives that, by all means, I am here for that. So I think, having, I guess, like the emotional intelligence and situational awareness to kind of read the room and be like, what does this person need right now? Is she coming to me because she's overwhelmed and she wants help with a solution right now? Like, we're going to figure out, what can you do? What's the next step for you? Or is she like, I just need to bitch and moan for a minute and have you not intervene, and know, when to apply which. I think the thing to remember is that all of those lows will pass through. I'm thinking I had a pretty epic meltdown with my husband, not at him, but he was the recipient of it, pretty recently. And it felt so good to get out. And ever since I have, like, all the stuff that I was literally crying and swearing about, like, hasn't even come up again. I just needed to get it out. So sometimes, like, that's the rock bottom moment, and the release of it is like, okay, now I can pick myself up, do what I need to do, take that next step forward, and I'm good. But just remembering that whatever you're going through, though you might not see it right now, is shaping you into a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. And at some point in the future, you will realize that there was a lesson in there, or there was a silver lining, or there was some benefit to you that isn't clear at the time. And your low times are just rough patches. They're just storms that we all weather, and they are not reasons to give up. Might you have to change course? Might you pump the brakes for a little bit? Sure. But you will come out the other end. Every client I've worked with has experienced what we call the grind, where it's just, kind of one of those low points where you're like, I'm still working hard. I don't really feel like I have enough to show for it. Just kind of like, wah, I don't like this. And without exception, when you continue putting one foot in front of the other, you will come out the other side. And when you do, you'll be so much more appreciative of the easy times and the smooth sailing, because now you know how hard it can be. So I'd say if life is heavy right now, you're not alone. Have an outlet for that, and then recognize that you have more control than you think, and it feels good and it feels empowering to control what you can.
I love it. It's like just the perfect place to end right there. Just that ironically seems to be the ending of a lot of my episodes lately. Is sometimes you just need to let it out, maybe see a therapist, maybe get a good friend. Like, it's amazing how that can help your health so much. Is just what's going on up here can affect your physical body so much that sometimes you just got to have that release. So you're just like, better now. I can do this.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
It's amazing how that works. But like I said, it was just like a perfect ending right there. So I want to thank you so much for spending time with us here and taking the time to talk to us about all these things. You're just a huge amount of knowledge. I can tell, like, you've been doing this for years, and you have the knowledge and experience of truly, truly helping people. If any of our listeners wanted to find you or have you as a coach online or anything, how would they be able to find you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been an absolute blast. You asked amazing questions, and I hope you guys listening have gotten something out of it. I have a weight loss that lasts cheat sheet, which breaks down the formula that I was talking about earlier and gives you the goals, the next steps for all of those pieces, as well as I offer a free 15-minute breakthrough session to help you implement that cheat sheet in your life. You can get it at esteravant.com/cheat sheet. I'm sure the link will be in the notes somewhere.
Yes, I will put it there.
I am also active on Facebook and Instagram. My full name, Esther.Avant. And I have a podcast called Live Diet Free that you can find in all the podcast places.
And I will make sure there's links to all of that so people can find it. Because I know some of you are like running or in the car or whatever. So that way you can go back and get it later. Because
I always podcast when I'm doing laundry, I'm out walking. I'm like, never am I able to take notes from a podcast. So I appreciate the links.
Yes, podcasting is when I listen to those, it's always on my runs. Because if I listen to music, I go too fast. So
interesting. That's not a problem I've ever had.
I always do it. And then I also get bored a lot quicker with music than I do with podcasts because I'm brain engaged. I love it. That's actually,
I feel the same way.
Spare tip for you, listeners.
Yeah, no,
listen to podcasts.
That's a great one. Because I've noticed if I'm doing music, I'm always like, no, not that one, not that one, not that one. Whereas a podcast, you just turn it on, you brain engage, and then next thing you know, you're done.
And then you learn something while also getting your health together. It's beautiful,
exactly.
Right?
Very efficient.
Well, thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate it more than you know. And just, I hope everybody learned something today. Thanks so much, runners, for spending time with me and listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, please hit that subscribe button and leave me a review. I always love to hear from my listeners. And if you want more Let's Run Fit in your life, find me on Instagram at Let's Run Fit with BeLit. Until next time, runners! The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical or professional advice. Please always consult a medical professional if you're seeking medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The Let's Run Fit podcast is not liable for risk or issues associated with using or acting upon the information in this podcast.